Hi, everyone. We're just getting folks over from the breakout room, not breakout room, sorry, but getting them from main room into the panelist room. So give us one moment.
Hi. It says I can't turn my video on because the host just stopped it. I don't know. I'm sure you all. Sorry.
Yeah, we're having the same experience, Ben.
I'll take a look into that. One moment.
I am as well. Hi, Damien.
Good afternoon. Just let me know when you're ready to roll.
Will do. Austin, it looks like Meg is still waiting to be let in as well.
Yes, I am corresponding right now.
Okay.
I'm trying to promote Meg and it is giving me an error code. Let me look and see what Zoom is going on with that.
Okay, everyone, we'll get started shortly. We're just trying to get a few folks over into the panelists from the main meeting room. Give us 1 second, please.
We apologize, everybody. It looks like we're having a couple Zoom issues, not just one right now. So please bear with us.
Make this podcast possible. That's
In the meantime, while we're working on these issues, could everyone put their microphones on mute, please? All right, while Austin is working on our technical issues, we can get started. Damien, if you would like to get started with the land acknowledgement, we can get going.
Sure, and even before starting there, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order, and it is 3:40 p.m. and we'll start our work by grounding it in the theory of change, which is if we create a homeless response system that centers people with lived experience, then we will be able to focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. And so we are obviously holding this budget committee meeting remotely, and it is being publicly broadcasted. And I will hold off on the roll call piece just so Austin can continue working on some of those technical issues. And so I'll do the land acknowledgement. And so we acknowledge that King County is located on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. We honor this land and its people, past and present, and we are committed to directing funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people.
Hey folks. What I think is happening is I think Zoom is down. The basic settings that should be attached to the meeting are not working. But I believe we have folks here, and so Damien, if you want to start with the land acknowledgement, I believe Tiffany and Meg are here, and hopefully screen sharing will still work, and we can, get the presentation done and still answer folks' questions. I know Austin is working on the back end, but it does appear to be a problem with the platform.
So that sounds good. We can have Austin come back around and do the roll call towards the end. And so
Sounds good. Thank you.
Megan team, if you are ready to jump in and if you're able to share your screen, if you could let us know, that would be awesome.
I'm going to try right now. Just 1 minute. Sorry, just making sure I'm opening the right one. Okay. Can everybody see?
Yeah.
All right.
Can you?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Meg.
You're welcome. I couldn't do it before sharing, so it's always that awkward behind the curtain view. Sorry about that, guys. So thank you all for being here today at our, I guess this is our implementation board budget meeting, and it's not April 12th anymore. For some background, we have some context around the 2023 budget. New funding approved for the RHA in 2024 in the city and the county 2-year budgets, 2022-2023 accomplishments, 2023 one-time funding that's not continued in 2024, providing for some information and some context for discussions we would like to have as budgets are being formulated by the city and county executives, and RHA staffing need context as well. We'll talk about approved funding for 2024, which is, as we talked about last time, largely comprised of funding that's already been approved by the city and the county and other funding sources. And then we will go through a more detailed presentation of the recommendations. So first off, for context, the 2022 and 2023 accomplishments, we have been very busy. Partnership for Zero implementation. At the time we did this slide, more than or around 100 people have been permanently housed. The systems advocate workforce has grown to 25 and will be growing further to around 40, with 15 additional positions currently being filled. The state of Washington has awarded the RHA funding for the right-of-way program directly to the RHA. 8 encampments have been resolved, 292 people provided with emergency housing, shelter, or permanent housing, and 90% of people engaged in these sites have moved into a housing resource. The North King County regional interlocal agreement was adopted by Bothell, Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, Shoreline, and Woodinville, and our budget reflects funding from those jurisdictions. We completed our first year of system administration in 2022, executed more than 260 contracts, and overall spending in 2022 was $130 million. And we got a clean financial audit for 2021, our first year of operations from the state of Washington. So this was our 2023 award. It included inflation from the city and one-time funding from the county that also was used to address inflation in 2023. So our total budget was around $228.5 million. We had some incremental changes. These incremental changes were approved for the RHA in the second year of city and county 2-year budgets. One was to sustain funding for the Soto shelter in 2024, and one being some additional funding that was added for housing and essential needs. The service changes that are expected with the one-time funding that has been allocated to stand up new services or enhance existing or expand existing services. City of Seattle has about $9.3 million in expiring one-time funding for programs, and King County has about $4.9 million similarly for one-time funding. The difference here is that the King County funding is actually funded through 2024, but there's a decision to be made this year about whether to accept administration of these programs if we are to just wind them down again and at the end of 2024, having, takes a lot of energy to wind a program down, as we are learning right now. And Partnership for Zero, we will transition Partnership for Zero costs to Medicaid in 2024. So that one-time foundation funding will be expiring, but we do have a source to replace it. We do anticipate about 85% of costs will be reimbursed, by Medicaid. And so that leaves about $879,000 that would be unreimbursed. We expect that we will have sufficient underspend in 2023 to be able to cover this cost in 2024, and we would prioritize that in our request for any unspent funds in 2023 to be carried into 2024. This is just a little bit more information on those programs that are expiring.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, I'm sorry, I can't see.
Oh.
This might be another Zoom issue. I'm sorry if you've been raising your hand. I can't see the Zoom while I'm presenting in this mode. I apologize for that.
Sure. I don't know if you want to take questions as you go along or at the end, or if Damon has a preference on that.
Actually, it would be great if we could keep questions to the end. A lot of this stuff is gone over again in the description of the recommendations, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, just please make sure that we save time, because I know we're already quite behind.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I will try and hit the high points, but get to the end quickly. Just wanted to point out we do have a schedule that describes these projects in a little more detail. Wanted to provide a little more context for the request to discuss the need for additional staff at the RHA. So you can see here, this is sort of the breakdown of our current staffing, our current sort of head count. About almost 61% of positions at the RHA provide direct services to either unhoused neighbors or support for service providers. In contrast, about 1.6% supports people operations or human resources. 4.8% of our staff support our positions support financial operations,
Sorry,
and
Meg.
about
Uh,
somebody's got something going on in the background.
Yeah, I apologize. Ben, I think you're not muted and we're hearing a lot of noise. I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. And then lastly, about 13.7% of positions support CEO policy, strategy, and planning. The sort of looking ahead to what is going to be needed and how we can do this work as smart as possible. That just provides some context for the requests for staff later on in the recommendations. So this is a breakdown of the City of Seattle funding by source. So you can just see we get funding from the City of Seattle for CDBG, from CDBG, ESG, General Fund, the Office of Housing Levy, short-term rental tax, and the Clifford is the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery funding. That is one-time funding, and you can see here how it is sort of allocated by the City of Seattle across these different programs. King County, same thing. Document recording fee, rental assistance, housing program, consolidated homeless grant, which is a state program, ESG, CDBG, and the housing and essential needs program. And so this is our full budget with all of the funding sources laid out and with a side-by-side with 2023. So there's a lot of information in this slide, but I will just continue for the sake of time. This is our admin budget, the RHA's operations and admin budget with the comparison to 2023 and some notes on where there are significant changes between years. And again, we note that that deficit there. We do include Partnership for Zero costs and expected funding here in our operations and admin budget because it is a direct service provided by RHA staff. And then we have a higher level comparison between 2023, again, with notes that are explaining any changes. So getting into the recommendations, we recommend approval of the 2024 proposed budget totaling $250 million. And then a couple of things that we would like to talk about, potentially advocate for supplemental funding during budget deliberations. One being the funding for currently operating programs supported with one-time funding at the city and the county, which totals $14.2 million. And RHA staff totaling up to $2 million, depending, of course, on what final salaries end up being. So again, we've laid out the budget here. The process here would be approval from the IB and instructing the RHA to transmit our budget to the governing committee and recommending governing committee approval, and then ultimately authorizing the RHA to submit the 2024 proposed budget to the City of Seattle and King County. And then this would be the discussion of regularizing funding for currently operating programs that are funded with that one-time funding. Again, the total is 14.2 and the breakdowns between the city and the county are here. And a reminder, Schedule A is there if you would like to see which programs are currently supported with those one-time funds. During the other discussion would be around RHA staffing requests. So we have requested positions that are in those categories of staffing that are pretty small relative to other parts of the RHA's operations to help support the RHA to be just as effective an organization as we can be. So for people operations, requesting funding for a dedicated director for people operations, especially given a lot of the growth in the team. And that comes with a lot of complications and a lot of just a lot of work that we could use some more folks to help us out with. And then along with that support staff of a people operations coordinator, assisting the director and a specialist. For finance, recommending a chief financial officer dedicated to managing the RHA's finances, budget forecasting, financial reporting, overseeing the finance team, and 2 financial analysts that will help with the type of reporting that comes with those very many funding sources that you saw, and also being able to more timely provide ad hoc reports in response to requests from funders and internal and also external stakeholders, actually, including well, just all kinds of things. We have requests for reports on spending and our funding. And right now it is difficult to respond to those with a whole lot of speed, given the other constraints on our finance team. And then also looking at staff in that sort of collective group of the kind of the CEO's purview for policy strategy and planning. So building a policy team within that group, looking at a senior director of policy. This is actually somebody that's already on board, but the position is currently grant funded, and that person would lead a team that would develop and implement policy initiatives related to the organization-wide initiatives. And 3 policy coordinators would assist the director of policy in that work. It's important to note one of those positions is grant funded right now. We actually have one of those positions. The other 2 would be new. That one position that's already hired is grant funded and does require ongoing funding past 2023 in order to continue here at the RHA. And then also within that, the Housing Central Command Manager. So that person would lead the work to recruit landlords and do other work related to leading the Housing Central Command, making sure that we have sufficient units and also other resources to meet the need, and landlord relationships are maintained. But also other work around helping to direct the field teams and ensuring that the other parts of that operation are sufficiently supported in order to be as effective as possible. So just going back, we can leave this on for discussion. These are the 3 recommendations that we have for you today and tomorrow. And let me see if I can get out of so that I can see people. Okay.
So opportunity for questions now. Ben, you had a question, and then after that, we'll go to Nate.
Go ahead, Nate. Mine's more technical in nature.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Thanks, Meg, for this. And first off, it was helpful to see I had questions related to the funding of staff to increase to 11. The document, the meeting materials document we got for this in advance, or at least the ones that are posted on the web page, certainly have additional pages in kind of more thoroughly describing the job descriptions and areas of need in the way that isn't on the web page. And so I hope that can get updated for the public to see more thoroughly too, as well as members of this board. Some of these make more sense to me right off the bat than others, but I totally get it collectively. I'm just curious in terms of the approach for this, and this may be a question for you and Mark and Tiffany all together. I'm just curious in terms of the approach of, are these all the 11? I'm sure there, I mean, I can imagine there's be a lot of other positions for KCRHA would want to embark on to grow the body of work that what we need to do countywide, regionally. Are there other positions that aren't listed here that Mark, yourself, or others would foresee now or later, but we just are prioritizing this as our top 11 that we absolutely need to do for 2024 to accomplish the work that we're aspiring to do or need to get done? And then yeah, that's essentially it. I'll stop there.
I can take that one. So, yes, we do anticipate more positions. What we are, Helen, who is not able to be here today, is leading a body of work with a consulting team focused on looking at the original NIS report, looking at current staffing and doing a gaps analysis in order against like workflows, et cetera, in order to create a more ongoing list of positions that we would seek to fill with, all of the appropriate support behind why those are the positions to fill. The ones that we are currently seeking to fill, we have already identified as being, pretty significant, and their absence impacting KCRHA operations, weekly, really. And so we're very clear that those are spaces where we need to deepen the bench and expand the capacity, either in terms of the number of capable hands doing something, or some skill sets that are not on staff currently. I would be happy if we wanted to go into executive session. I don't know if we can do executive session in a subcommittee actually, but in the full meeting yesterday, or tomorrow rather, I'm happy to go into executive session and talk about some of these things, as they do involve staff.
No, that's great. No, thanks for summarizing that, Mark. Very insightful. Appreciate it.
Hey, Ben, and then after Ben, Chris.
Thanks. So, my comments here really just stem from two things. One is my reading of the ILA, which gives the implementation board a very clear mandate for oversight and annual work planning and approving a budget. I think it's those are fundamental, important responsibilities. And secondly, just having been involved in a lot of budgeting over the years in various different kinds of organizations, and having watched the public sector's budgeting in the city of Seattle and other jurisdictions, and it just strikes me as odd that we're basically saying that we're going to do the same thing next year that we did in 2024 that we plan to do in 2023, which we actually decided back in beginning of 2022. We've learned a lot over the last couple of years. I think about the major programs that we've had, like Partnership for Zero and the right-of-way work, they've pivoted tremendously, and that's a good thing, right? That's what we should be expecting as we try different things and learn and really march towards our mission of bringing as many people inside as possible. And so the question really is, do we have any data that suggests that our breakdown of program spending is the right one? Like, do we have data on effectiveness of the different types of programs? Do we have data on the cost per resolution of an individual's homelessness crisis, or do we have data on the cost of supporting programs? I know that such data is required, in the ILA, that we need to be able to be providing it. If we just don't have it yet. But even without that data, the second question is, do we really not think that anything should change? We've now started to really pivot our 5-year plan in a very, very big way. Is it not the case that we may have other priorities or other ideas for programs than what we thought about a year ago? And keeping in mind, this budget is going to be in effect until the end of 2024, which is a long time from now, but the end of 2024 is also the expiry of the ILA, right? That's the end of the 5-year period. So if we're going to adjust course, if we're going to try and make sure that we're as successful as possible, now is the time. And I'm very keen to hear Mark and everyone else's thoughts on whether or not there's anything in here that we want to try and see more data on, try and understand the effectiveness on, and potentially make any tweaks.
since I was named here, I can begin the response, although certainly anyone from the team can chime in. I mean, we have a lot of information, and if you look back to the previous year's budget presentations, we went through and did analysis on cost per housing exit across the entire portfolio. We made significant asks across every single program domain. And received, a modest increase in funding in a number of spaces as a result. But the authority does do biennial budgeting. And part of the reason why our ask last year was large is, frankly, because we anticipated the need to deepen investment in a number of spaces and also change some of the structures of those investments. The executives and the councils made their decisions, and the MSAs that the RHA is in with our funding partners commit the authority to biennial budgeting. And so similar to the county and some portions of the city, although I believe Director Dingley is trying to move the city also more broadly to a biennial budgeting framework, this cycle is designed strictly for supplemental. And the next large discussion around how much money we might be able to put into certain buckets or significant shifts that require certainly executive and likely legislative authorization will be in the next budget cycle.
Mark, are you suggesting that biennial budgeting means that we can't make any changes to our program mix in the second year of the biennium?
The way that we have discussed the biennial budget with our funders is that this is a year for small supplemental asks, and that is how we have approached this. And certainly I think in our discussions with both the city and county budget teams, the discussion of significant policy changes, both in terms of moving a great deal of money between program types, or other things I think that you're suggesting was not the framing that we received in our instruction from those offices, or again in line with I think how we conceived of biennial budgeting when we entered the authority into these agreements.
I just want to give the authority the opportunity to have its budget reflect the priorities that you have and that are on the ground. And so you've done a remarkable job. You collectively done a remarkable job of pivoting and doing what's needed to bring people inside. And I think that the numbers that you have here really reflect that. But the kinds of tools that you have been using now are different from the ones that you thought you were going to use. And that is great, right? That is a sign of progress and learning. I just don't think that we should lock ourselves into a budget from a year ago for the next year and a half. And so I think we would probably be the only department of the city of the county that is not making changes to its budget. And the guidance clearly was around keeping the overall spending constant. That makes sense. I thought we're not going out with another big ask. But I think if we feel like there are things that we need to change in here, we should try to change them. And so my proposal, which I circulated by email, was that we amend the budget resolution to give us that flexibility, just to say that we're going to submit this total number and we'll stay within that, but that we're going to spend the next few months as we go through this process to really tweak these programs mixes, allow you to do that and to do it in the basis of a database evaluation of what's working and what's not. The kind of database evaluation that I would hope would be in the annual operating report that we are putting forward, and which I hope will be part of the annual operating plan that we'll put forward for 2024. So I'd like to get the opportunity to work on that annual operating plan, and I want to have the flexibility to allow us to make it as good as it can be. And if it requires changing spending priorities, I think we should retain that flexibility. So that's my piece. And you can react if you want to, but you don't have to. We can hand it over to Christopher.
I don't have a reaction. I think, I would caution the board against, submitting a resolution that would cause the governing committee and the funders to, frankly, either need to take more just time to discuss and delay the submission of an on-time budget, which is also stipulated in the MSAs. Again, let folks know that at this stage, what the board is contemplating is authorization for discussion. And so certainly I think a number of the things that you've raised, Ben, can be part of some of those discussions. But we also need to be extremely cognizant of, the legislative language that is attached to our fund sources, which also drives sort of, where the spending goes, right? And so, Jeff Sims, who came over from City Council, can certainly attest, and he's on the line, that it is not simply the will of the executives, but the balance of those branches of government that inscribes the intent on the dollars that come to the RHA and our responsibility to execute on that intent. But again, that said, at this point, we are simply seeking authorization to discuss. And so we could certainly bring up some of those concerns, Ben.
Thank you.
Okay, Christopher.
I have thank you, a number of questions, and I don't want to dominate the conversation with the some of them are slightly observational, but they are questions. I think I'm a bit confused. The additional funding for staffing inside the RHA administration, is that another conversation? I don't see it in the budget, that $2 million for those additional 11 positions. Is that also what's being discussed right now, or is that at a later date? I'm slightly confused because I'm also reading a follow-up email that was shared yesterday that we just got on the rest of the board at 3:59. So can you explain that?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that if you're okay with it, Mark. I think part of this is to more accurately, we are sort of orienting the RHA to the sort of the funding environment and calibrating every year. So this is meant to sort of more accurately reflect where we are in the broader scheme of budget development. So this is our submission to the city and the county for their consideration as the mayor of the city of Seattle and the King County executive create and are formulating their budget proposals, which will then go through review by their councils and ultimately be approved in December, which is when we will come back to the board with the final approved budget. And so this is sort of the opening, like the start of a conversation with the city and the county. And at this point, because we do have kind of more perfect information than we have in the beginning of the 2-year cycle, we are right now sort of recognizing what's been approved for us and that would be the base of our proposal. But there's always conversations that happen during that development process about potential changes, or in this case, requests for additional funding that I think we just wanted to flag, rather than those coming back to you in December with with having had no context or discussion. And so that is really the intent here. It comes across a little clunky, but it is our intent to try and just more accurately reflect where we are in the budget process at this time.
Okay, I think I understand. I appreciate that. Then the exploration that Helen is doing on org chart and staffing models, it'll be great if that could be shared. Then I do have 2 other follow-up questions. They're somewhat secondary now. The 2 positions that are grant funded, they're both expiring in 2023. Did I hear you say that?
Yes.
The senior director of policy and the youth policy coordinator are both grant funded. When do they expire?
Yeah, 2023. They expire in 2023.
Okay, at the end of the year, we're in 2023. So when?
Yeah. So they they expire at the end of the year.
Okay, thanks. And then who's currently doing your HR?
We have our assistant chief administrative officer for operations oversees 2 people operations specialists right now, and we have a HR consulting firm that helps us out, helping us facilitate hiring processes and on kind of other types of issues that arise from time to time. And we also have a labor attorney on contract.
Perfect. And then who's doing all the finances then if you don't have a CFO or analysts?
Tiffany Brooks is our assistant chief administrative officer for finance.
Okay,
And she has an accounting team that works with her, and I work a lot on finance as well.
okay. Fantastic, thanks. Then the other questions related more into the RFP, I have a mechanical question that I'm struggling with. In this RFP, or I'm sorry, in this proposal, you show that you're going out to bid to rebid all the contracts to RFP I think it's in June.
Yes.
So what happens if they come back and I don't know what the duration is of the RFP, but I'm just going to assume 60 or 90 days. What if they come back in the fall and they need more money? How are you calibrating for the possibility, the very high possibility that things cost more?
Well, I think we can only award the funding that has been awarded to us.
Sure.
So we would award based on the amount of funding that we have available. We wouldn't award more money than we have authority to award.
I totally recognize that, but I guess the outcomes are predicated on how much money we have. And we're going into this without knowing how much money it's going to cost to deliver what we're currently doing.
I'm sorry. So, I think some of this is a little circular to me. I think we are only allowed to disperse what we are authorized. All of the procurements are structured in line with the biennial budget that was approved. We have not received any word from either the mayor's office or the executive's office that we are facing budget cuts or shortfalls. And so we anticipate being able to award those amounts. But the way the procurements are written is that we are, to Meg's point, we will fund what we are able to fund. I think that there's a broader discussion underway at a number of different levels, some of which our RHA has been part of, around frontline worker pay, insurance costs for providers, and just a number of other concerns about the growing financial burden that the system is under, that the allocations have not kept up with. And I think that we are aware of that, and some of the decisions that may need to be made over the course of reprocurement is frankly, what can we afford, right? Like, what can we actually afford to deliver at high quality? And some of that will be, frankly, come through the provider proposals, right? Like, we have encouraged providers to submit real and accurate budgets, to not try to turn a nickel into a dime. And so there may be some clarity that comes through that process. We also continue to explore alternate revenue streams, inclusive of Medicaid, et cetera, to support service expansions and service deepening across a number of our provider spaces, utilizing foundational community supports or other streams of funding. But I think I take your line of questioning to really be about what is this budget do to fundamentally address the budget shortfalls that providers face, and again, in keeping with the biennial nature of our budgeting, we made really significant asks around provider salaries, around the need to shore up the workforce, et cetera, in last year's budget cycle, we received some incremental adjustments, and we have, deployed those. We tried to coordinate with the state around their stipend work, et cetera. We are supportive of the discussion around raising provider wages that's been, led by the Human Services Coalition. But ultimately, right, like at the technical level, we can only award what we are authorized to disperse.
Interesting. Thank you.
Jeff, I see you have your hands up. Is it in response to something that you've heard?
Yeah, I think that Meg, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Christopher, since you asked specifically about positions that are funded, I'm one of the grant funded positions. My understanding is it's a 3-year award. It's the youth position that expires this year, but not mine. If that's not correct, obviously, Meg or Mark, please clarify that.
I don't have that in front of me, but my understanding, I wish Paula were here. I do know that the youth policy position does expire this year. It was a 2-year grant from Rakes. And your funding stream, Jeff, comes through We Are In, and I just apologize, I don't have that information in front of me, but I can get back to folks with the answer.
I mean, that funding is subject to an extension, and it was supposed to be 2 years, which began at the beginning of 2022.
Understood. Thank you, Meg.
Gordon?
Thank you, Damien. I was unable to join until shortly after 4 o'clock, so I have a very specific question for me personally. Is there a resolution on the floor, and are we debating the resolution, or are we not yet at the resolution stage? Just trying to catch up to y'all.
No, and correct me if I'm wrong as well, anyone else in the room, but any action would be taken at tomorrow's meeting. This is really designed to get questions answered and feedback in regards to the presentation.
Got it. Appreciate the context. Thanks.
Other questions folks have, or anything else, Mark, from you or your team that you would like to share?
Oh,
Go ahead, Gordon, and then followed by Christopher.
yeah. And again, since this is level setting conversation, I'm in catch-up mode, which for I apologize, could not be helped. And I was thinking about our conversation at the retreat, that we're a board who are recommitting to be more accountable to our responsibilities. That's how we closed out the retreat. But we also talked about the fact that we don't yet, as a collective, have a good sense of the cadence of the regional authority, much less the cadence of our areas of focus and responsibility and accountability as IB. So part of where I'm struggling is that we can and should do better in terms of IB lining up with the needs of Mark and staff and the regional authority who are employed. However, in this first year, I'm also wanting to not be so focused on getting it right that we get in the way of the regional authority doing the work that is currently a priority, currently underway, and for which funds have been identified and authorized by 2 of the major funders, the city and the county. So that's where I am as we finish out this meeting, is trying to say that, yeah, we need to do better at this in terms of lining up, in terms of timing, but this may not be the year in which to do so in a way that holds up work that is already underway, or puts a cloud or adds burden when funding is already been identified and available, intended to be used. And for many of us who are nonprofits, there's this whole thing of restricted funding, unrestricted funding. And I feel like Mark's and the team have some of that they're having to deal with. And all of us who lead nonprofits want unrestricted funding, and we never get 100% unrestricted funding. So we have to make do with the constraints that come with it. And that becomes a real nightmare. And at some point, I ask my boards to trust me and the team that we understand the donor intent and that we're putting the funds to good use. So I think it's really good that we're getting clarification on goals and objectives and limitations of funding. But I'm not sure at the beginning or the end of the day that that's our primary duty. So those are the things that I'm struggling with at the moment. And thanks for listening. I'm stepping back now.
Christopher, you had your hand up.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize. I appreciate Gordon's perspective and question or comment. Real small technical question. As I was looking through this, one of the other things that I'm very curious about, and this is the time to ask all these basic questions. One of the items is Medicaid billing and dollars through the Partnership for Zero and a 5.2 million. And are we already receiving Medicaid dollars and set up for Medicaid? Because I'm curious how is that optimistic or is that actually bankable?
So that is an estimate. We are planning to ramp up Medicaid reimbursement so that we can be, start the year with this. We'll ramp up Medicaid reimbursement this year so that we can start the year in 2024 sort of at a run. We have been working with the Corporation for Supportive Housing that has done work on getting communities set up for billing for foundational community supports through Medicaid to help us establish the infrastructure and the trainings and things that will be needed for RHA staff to be able to do that. We have been looking for the best information we've been able to find about reimbursable costs is that 85% of costs are reimbursable, and so or would be reimbursed, and absent another source or absent more information, that's what we were using for the budget. But I see that Mark is unmuted, so I will stop talking now.
Thanks, Meg. A couple things. So no, that is not, we are not currently billing Medicaid. I believe the team, but we are a certified Medicaid biller, and the team is prepping to do their first dry runs in the next couple weeks. Those will establish, where there are insufficient documentation, where something kicks back, et cetera, allowing us to address those issues and then begin actually billing Medicaid for the services that we provide once we have adjusted, whatever those dry runs kick back. We have done extensive work with the Corporation for Supportive Housing from a technical assistance front, working with the team. We are in discussion with WeRN about a phase 2 of that contract that would broaden that support to include a number of other agencies in the community, as well as continue to provide support to CASER-HA staff to ensure that their case notes, et cetera, are up to snuff and able to, be easily moved through the billing program, which is called a Validity, as I recall. The other thing that I would flag on the Medicaid reimbursement front is that, we are in a unique position because of the initial grant funding that we received for Partnership for Zero, which was really tethered to us engaging in this kind of activity and stress testing it on behalf of the community. Peter Lynn, who's on the line, has also done some looking at what other communities across the state are capturing through foundational community supports versus what King County is capturing. And based on folks who are currently enrolled, and this is across the entire community, I believe Peter had indicated that there was between, I think, $6 and $7 million of missed revenue last year, again, across the community, not just within KCRHA. So from our perspective, I think, this is a really conservative estimate based on, again, what CSH has given us with regard to, looking at 85% of cost, et cetera, and making sure that we're not overshooting, but that we are also being clear that this is a significant opportunity to expand service revenue, both internal to the agency and across the county.
Thanks, Mark.
Ben?
Thanks. So I know that KCRH has a ton of data and is very data oriented in its culture. Part of what I would normally see in budgets like this is some sort of sense of ROI. Mark, how would you feel about working on an annual plan or some kind of annual budget that had a target for how many people we're going to help, in what way we'll help them, sheltered and otherwise, and then kind of what the cost per user is? We used to say customer, I don't think we use that term anymore, but cost per person served by the different program types. Now that kind of analysis would really help me a lot in understanding our priorities and some of the trade-offs that we're making. And I don't know if others feel the same way, but I know you've got a strong inclination towards data. So I wonder if that's something that you would be interested in doing as part of this budget process over the next few months.
I know we're at time, and I think both myself and the team would need to have a much deeper understanding of what you mean when you say ROI. That's not a traditional phrase in public administration. And I think that the budget presentation from last year does a really in-depth analysis on the cost of all of the different types of programs that we run, in particular, the cost of an exit to permanent housing. That's, I think, the thing that we have been, obviously particularly attuned to. We have tracked the number of permanent housing exits that the system generates, returns to homelessness. All of those are on the dashboards on the website. Additionally, as I've said a couple times, we increased the number of exits to permanent housing last year, more so than the 2 years prior. So those are the kinds of things that I think we're really focused on. And beyond that, I think, again, I would need to understand, and the team would need to understand, what you're looking for when you say return on investment. And certainly I would welcome other board members to chime in here if they have thoughts about that, but I'm certainly not closed to it. But I think it's a much deeper discussion.
Good. I'll take that as a yes. Thank you.
Austin?
Chair, if I may take an attendance.
Absolutely, sir.
Awesome. Member Anderson? Member Caminos?
Here.
Member Carvalho? Sorry, I had a cough. Member Shelmanek? Member Merritts?
Here.
Member Spotted Elk?
Here.
Member McHenry Jr.?
Present.
Member Patnaud?
Here.
Member Reddy? Member Rankin? And Member Ross?
Here.
Thank you, guys.
I know we started about 10 minutes late, so we were scheduled to wrap up 3 minutes ago, but I want to make sure that we get any additional questions in if any board members have any. And again, as I said earlier, Mark, if anyone from you, whether it's you or your team, have anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up.
I think the only thing that I would add is, there was a slide in Meg's presentation, which I would urge the board to take a look at, which, we talk frequently about the 100 folks who work at the RHA, but I really do think it's important for folks to understand that the vast majority of that staff is in direct service and in our program and system performance team working directly with providers, and that the operations of the RHA really do not have the depth of bench necessary for us to truly be, I think, successful. The team works incredibly hard, and I can't stress that enough. So when Meg talked about, Tiffany working with the accounting team, I want to be really clear that that accounting team doesn't just do the, presentations that you're looking at today. They also work on, to make sure that payroll is run. They manage the contracts with the providers. They ensure that the provider invoices are paid. They, work to ensure that we are drawing down our fund source, that we're invoicing the city, the county, the federal government on time. There are incredibly complex operations that team does in addition to this work. And so I think that, again, I'd be happy to discuss this in executive session tomorrow, but there's a depth of work that is happening, and the team is incredibly capable. I don't want this to seem like a discussion of their competency, but they are under-resourced to be able to do their work well and at the speed that our environment demands.
My response to that, Mark, is just we would want to make sure for that the reason qualified, and if there would be any action for the board to take potentially afterwards in relation to what's shared in the executive session. So we want to get that all clarified.
Yes. I would say the qualifying reason to go into executive session tomorrow, if folks want to put it on the agenda or amend the agenda via voice vote at the beginning, would just be, discussing personnel, which I believe is always an acceptable use.
Mm-hmm. But I'd anticipate no action to follow, correct? Related
Correct.
to, yeah.
Correct.
As a matter of process, can you maybe explain for myself what tomorrow's meeting is going to look like? We have 1 hour set aside to do final discussion and vote to recommend this budget or make final motion on it.
Yes, that is my understanding, although I would look to Austin to clarify any procedural.
Yeah, pretty much that's what we have right now is we'll do any final discussions. The staff that are currently here have also been invited to that special meeting. That'd be Tiffany Brooks, Ben Lynn, Meg Barclay, Jeff Sims, Mark Dones. And hopefully we'll have the vote on resolution 2023-02, which recommends the suggested budget to the GC so that they could vote on 420.
And obviously I was unable to attend last week's meeting. So today's presentation, let me ask it this way, if a board member was not here today, they would not have seen what got presented at this meeting. Is that correct?
So the presentation that Meg went through today was slated for discussion at last week's meeting. The board ran out of time and dropped low quorum. So we scheduled this meeting to ensure that board members who perhaps had, deeper or more technical questions could ask them. The same presentation will be given again tomorrow for the entire board.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Any other final questions or comments? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
It's been moved by Nate. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Christopher. So it's been moved and seconded. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? And the motion carries. This meeting is adjourned at 4:39 PM. Thank you, Mark, to you and your team, and thank you, IB board members, for also making yourselves available to attend this afternoon. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Damien.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.